Welcome to this episode of Toronto Blue Jays Update. We've got some really interesting developments to talk about today regarding Cody Bellinger and what the Blue Jays should be thinking right now. Before we jump in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share your opinion in the comments because we really want to know where you stand on all of this. So the Yankees just made a pretty bold statement. Bob Nightingale is reporting that New York has made an internal decision not to get into a bidding war for Cody Bellinger. They've put their offer on the table. 5 years, $160 million with 2 opt-outs, and they're basically saying take it or leave it. If the Mets or anybody else wants to come in with some ridiculous blow-away offer, the Yankees are prepared to just walk away. Honestly, after the absolute insanity we saw with the Kyle Tucker signing and what happened with Bo Bichette, I totally get where the Yankees are coming from. They don't want to get sucked into another one of these bidding wars where the numbers just spiral completely out of control. It's actually a pretty reasonable position when you think about what's been happening this offseason. The Yankees' offer is honestly fair. The problem is we've seen teams willing to throw caution to the wind and make these crazy offers that blow everyone else out of the water. The question now becomes whether the Mets are really going to do it again. They already gave Bo Bichette that massive deal with the ridiculous annual value. Are they really going to turn around and do the same thing for Bellinger? I mean, maybe they are because it's the Mets, and Steve Cohen has shown he's willing to spend whatever it takes. But if they did that, you'd have 3 enormous contracts on their books heading into 2026. Even for a team with deep pockets, that's a serious commitment. Plus, they've still got other areas of the roster they need to address, so maybe the Yankees offer actually has a better chance of standing than people think. The other team we need to talk about here is obviously the Toronto Blue Jays. They were in on Kyle Tucker, and we're going to get to what they offered him in just a second, but they put together a long-term deal with a reasonable annual value. So if they're looking at Bellinger now, are they going to try to match what the Yankees are offering, or are they going to try to blow him out of the water? Based on what we know about how this front office operates, I don't think they're the type to go completely off the rails. Let's be real here. The Blue Jays should absolutely be in on Cody Bellinger. But do I think they're going to offer $42 million or $60 million per year like we've seen with some of these other deals? No, I don't. That's just not in Ross Atkins' DNA. That's not how Mark Shapiro operates. If they can convince themselves through their analytics and their evaluation process that Bellinger is genuinely worth $200 million, then I could see them putting together a competitive package. And look, the guy can play. He put up an .813 ops last year with an OPS plus of 125 and 29 home runs. Those are legitimately good numbers. If you want power in the lineup and someone who's going to get on base consistently, Bellinger fits that profile. The Jays could definitely outbid the Yankees right now since New York has drawn their line in the sand. What I don't see happening is Toronto doing the Bichette or Tucker thing where you're just throwing absurd money at a short-term deal and hoping it works out. Here's what actually got leaked about the Blue Jays' offer to Kyle Tucker, and I think this is going to make people feel a little better about missing out on him. They offered 10 years and $350 million. Anyone criticizing Ross Atkins for not offering enough needs to step back because that is an extremely competitive offer for a player of Tucker's caliber. That's exactly the type of deal that should have gotten it done. The problem is someone else went absolutely bonkers and offered $60 million per year for just a few years. When you break down the math, the Blue Jays were offering about $35 million per year in average annual value. We're hearing that Bellinger is looking for somewhere in the $36 to $37 million range, and the Yankees are currently sitting at around $32 million. So if Toronto values Bellinger almost as highly as they value Tucker from an annual salary perspective, we could actually see a competitive offer here that might get the job done. The big question is whether they view him in that same tier. Here's why I think this makes sense for the Blue Jays. Dalton Varsho and George Springer are both coming off the books after next season. That's a ton of salary flexibility opening up, and more importantly, that's 2 roster spots in the outfield that need to be filled. This is exactly why it makes sense to go after Bellinger now with a legitimate long-term deal rather than waiting and trying to piece together the outfield later. I'm not sitting here making a prediction that the Blue Jays are going to sign him. What I am saying is they absolutely should. This is probably their last real opportunity to add a significant piece while they still have this core together. When you look at next year's free agent market for outfielders, it's pretty barren. You've got Springer, Varsho, Randy Arozarena, but there aren't those top-tier impact guys available. Bellinger might genuinely be the last chance to add someone of this caliber. I know there are concerns about his consistency from year to year, but when you look at his production over the last 3 years, He's averaging mid-20s home runs with an ops around 800. I'm totally fine with that kind of production. Plus, you're getting elite defense, legitimate speed with 13 stolen bases last year, and the flexibility to play first base if needed. If Vlad needs to move positions down the line or if there are injury concerns, Bellinger gives you that option. The defensive value is really what could make this worthwhile. Bellinger posted a 5.1 WAR last year, which means even when the bat isn't carrying him, he's providing significant value with his glove. If the Blue Jays can convince themselves that his defense provides a stable floor while his bat gives you 5 or 6 WAR ceiling potential, then maybe spending $35 to $37 million starts to make sense. I'll be honest, it's tough for me to wrap my head around. When I think about guys making that kind of money, I think about Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Mookie Betts. The idea that Bellinger would be making more than some of those guys is pretty wild, but that's just where the market is right now. The reality is Toronto tends to be more conservative with their spending compared to someone like Steve Cohen. They spend money, but they're calculated about it. Convincing ownership to go $34 to $35 million minimum for Bellinger is a tough sell, even though he would clearly make this team better. When you zoom out and look at the big picture, this is still very much the championship window. You've got Gausman, Varsho, Springer all still here. Adding Bellinger creates real depth and gives you another legitimate run at contending. And here's the flip side of being conservative. You can stick to your principles about not overpaying by a few million per year, but are you willing to risk letting one injury completely derail your season? That's the balance they're trying to strike. The Tucker situation was straightforward because he's in a completely different tier as a player. Bellinger is more complicated because, while he's not elite, he's better than most of what's currently on the roster and would definitely help. The question is whether that help is worth the price tag. Think back to when the Blue Jays signed George Springer for $25 million per year. At the time, people thought that was a lot of money. Now, based on what he's produced, that looks like an absolute bargain. If Toronto can convince themselves that a Bellinger deal might age similarly, then maybe it's worth taking the plunge. The bottom line is this. The Blue Jays have the financial flexibility after not landing Tucker. The money is there waiting to be spent. Bellinger is a legitimately good player, and the door is wide open with the Yankees refusing to budge on their offer. Now it comes down to whether Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro are willing to step through that door and make it happen. Let us know what you think in the comments. Should the Blue Jays go get Bellinger or stand pat with what they have? Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below.